Picture a 14-year-old girl standing in front of a sewing machine, creating her own dress from scratch. Not as a hobby, as part of her regular Thursday afternoon lessons. Across the corridor, boys are building wooden stools, using only hand tools and their own two hands. This wasn't a private school. This wasn't special. This was just Britain in the 1960s. Every single child left school knowing how to feed themselves, fix their clothes, and manage money. Let's step back into a classroom where life skills weren't optional extras, they were the curriculum. Skill 1. Household management and cooking. Domestic science wasn't just about boiling potatoes. Girls walked into kitchens and learned to plan entire meals from scratch. They calculated ingredient costs, understood basic nutrition, and practiced proper food hygiene before it was trendy. The lesson didn't end when the food was cooked either. They learned how to set a proper table, serve guests correctly, and clean up efficiently. But here's what made it different from today. These weren't fun cooking demonstrations. Teachers expected results. A girl might spend weeks planning a single dinner party on paper, working out the menu, pricing every ingredient down to the last ounce, and timing each dish so everything came out hot at the same moment. Then she'd actually cook it, serve it properly, and clean the kitchen to inspection standards. Grammar school girls practiced washing up in a specific order, glasses first, then cutlery, then plates, then pots, because that's how you kept the water cleanest longest. They learned which foods couldn't sit together in a larder, how to store leftovers safely, and how to stretch a Sunday roast across multiple meals. This wasn't theory, it was rehearsal for real life. By the time these girls left school, they could feed a family of 4 on a tight budget without opening a single cookbook or ringing their mothers in a panic. Skill 2. Sewing, mending, and clothing care. When your sock got a hole, you didn't bin it. You darned it. Schools made sure every child knew how. Needlework lessons taught hand sewing, machine operation, and garment construction. Students made aprons, cushion covers, and gym bags from raw fabric. They learned to replace buttons, repair tears, and even iron a man's shirt in the proper order, collar and cuffs first. The sewing machines weren't electric push-button affairs either. These were heavy treadle machines or basic hand crank models. Girls had to master tension settings, threading the bobbin and keeping their seams straight without any automatic features. A single crooked seam meant unpicking the entire thing and starting over. Teachers inspected hems with rulers, checking that every stitch sat exactly a 1/4 inch from the edge. But it went deeper than just making things. These lessons taught the actual value of clothing. When you've spent 3 weeks hand sewing a blouse, you don't toss it because of one loose button. You fix it, you care for it. Schools drilled in the understanding that throwing things away wasn't the automatic response. The message was clear. Clothing costs money, and you maintain what you own. This mindset shaped how an entire generation treated possessions, not as disposable, but as things worth preserving. Skill 3. Practical craft skills. Walk into a woodwork classroom in 1963, and you'd find boys, some as young as 11, confidently operating saws, chisels, and planes. They weren't just mucking about. They were learning to measure precisely, mark out designs, and understand joints like dovetails and mortise and tenon. Safety mattered, but so did competence. Teachers expected boys to handle proper tools properly, not plastic pretend versions. A typical term project might be building a small stool. Sounds simple until you realize what that actually involved. Selecting the right wood, calculating exact measurements, cutting 4 legs to identical lengths, chiseling out joints by hand, and assembling everything square and stable. No power tools, no shortcuts, just hand tools, patience, and concentration. If your measurements were off by even 1/8 of an inch, the whole thing wobbled. You learned fast. Metalwork ran the same way. Proper tools, proper techniques, proper results. Boys used files, hacksaws, and vices to create small projects like bookends or simple tools. They learned how different metals behaved, how to measure twice and cut once, and how to finish a piece so it didn't look homemade. These subjects existed for one reason: to prepare boys for apprenticeships and trades. Schools understood that not everyone was heading to university, and that working with your hands was a respectable, skilled path. A boy who could read a technical drawing, use tools safely, and understand how objects were constructed could walk straight into a trade and earn a decent living. That was the goal, and schools delivered it term after term. Skill 4. Personal responsibility and timekeeping. The school day ran like clockwork, and you either kept up or faced the consequences. Being late wasn't met with understanding, it was met with punishment. Forget your PE kit, that's a detention. Turn up without your homework, lines to write or worse. There were no second chances, no phone calls home to have mum drop off forgotten books. The morning bell rang at exactly 9 o'clock. If you weren't lined up in the playground by then, you were late. It didn't matter if your bus ran slow or your little brother made you miss breakfast. The school didn't care about excuses. You'd be marked late in the register, and 3 lates in a term meant a trip to the headmaster's office. That usually meant the cane. Children learned the hard way to watch the clock and get themselves to lessons on time. They had to remember what books they needed for each lesson, pack their bags the night before, and arrive prepared. A Tuesday might need your maths textbook, geometry set, English reader, history notebook, and gym shoes. Miss one item and you'd spend the lesson standing at the back or copying from someone else, if the teacher allowed it. More likely, you'd get a sharp telling off in front of everyone and punishment after school. Secondary school students often had to sign in and out, especially in the later years. This taught them early that their movements and time mattered to others, that institutions tracked you, and that you were responsible for accounting for yourself. No one was going to chase after you or remind you. You either managed your own time or you suffered. The system was harsh, but it created a generation that understood punctuality wasn't a suggestion, it was a basic requirement for functioning in society. Show up late to your factory shift in the 1960s, and you'd find the same attitude waiting for you. Except instead of detention, you'd lose pay or your job entirely. Skill 5. Discipline, self-control, and keeping in line. Discipline in 1960s. Schools wasn't a gentle concept. The cane, the slipper, the strap. These weren't threats. They were routine punishments that teachers used freely. Talk in the corridor? That's 3 strikes with the cane across your palm or backside. Answer back to a teacher. Public humiliation in front of the whole class. Possibly followed by physical punishment. Misbehave repeatedly? You'd be made an example of, caned in assembly where everyone could watch. The pain wasn't even the worst part, it was the ritual. You'd be told to hold out your hand, palm up. You'd have to stand there while the teacher took their time, sometimes making you wait while they finished another task. Then the strikes would come, sharp, burning pain that lasted for hours. Your hand would swell. You couldn't write properly for the rest of the day, but you couldn't complain. Complaining made it worse. You were expected to take your punishment, say, "Thank you, sir," and walk back to your seat without tears. But corporal punishment was just one part of it. Schools had dozens of unwritten rules that everyone somehow knew. Sit still with hands on the desk, stand when a teacher enters the room, never speak unless spoken to, endure boring tasks without complaint. If you were told to write, "I must not talk in class" 500 times, you did it. Quietly, without protest. Some children spent entire evenings filling exercise books with identical lines. Children learned to monitor their own behavior constantly, following adult authority and adjusting before they got in trouble. You watched teachers' faces, listened to their tone, noticed when they were in a bad mood. You learned which teachers were strict and which were slightly more forgiving. You developed an instinct for staying invisible when necessary and speaking up only when safe. Modern educators would be horrified. Child psychologists would have a field day. But whatever you think of the methods, they worked in a specific way. Pupils became expert at self-control in public, at understanding boundaries and hierarchies, and at accepting consequences without argument. They learned that the world had rules, that authority wasn't negotiable, and that your feelings about those rules didn't matter. These weren't just school skills, they were workplace skills. Most 1960s jobs operated on identical principles: do as you're told, don't question authority, follow procedures exactly, and keep your complaints to yourself. Factory floors, offices, shops, they all ran on obedience and hierarchy. Schools prepared children perfectly for that world. Skill 6. Social etiquette, manners, and presentation. Schools didn't just educate minds, they shaped behavior. Every interaction was scripted. Teachers were sir or miss, never by first names. Even thinking about using a teacher's first name was unthinkable. You waited to be dismissed before leaving. Breaking these rules brought swift punishment, so children learned them deep in their bones. Uniform standards were ruthlessly enforced. Every Monday morning meant inspection. Teachers walked down the lines checking polished shoes, actually polished, not just wiped. They examined ties to ensure they were tied correctly and pulled up to the collar. They checked hair length, cleanliness, and style. Girls had their skirts measured to ensure they hit exactly the right point below the knee. Too short, sent home. Too long, also wrong. It showed you didn't care about standards. Boys couldn't have hair touching their collars. Some schools measured with rulers. If your hair was even slightly too long, you'd be sent home with a note telling your parents to get you a haircut before you returned. No jewelry meant no jewelry, not even a simple watch for girls in some schools. No makeup, no nail polish. Girls with pierced ears had to remove their earrings at the school gate. This wasn't about fashion, it was about control and presentation. Schools were consciously manufacturing respectable adults who would fit into society without causing trouble or drawing attention. The message was clear: your appearance matters, conformity is expected, and personal expression comes second to social standards. Some grammar schools went even further. Girls learned elocution, how to speak properly without regional accents. They practiced poise and what teachers called ladylike behavior. How to sit with knees together, how to walk without slouching, how to enter a room gracefully. Boys learned posture and bearing, standing straight, looking people in the eye when speaking to them, shaking hands firmly. The goal was clear: turn working class and middle class children into people who could navigate formal situations without embarrassment. Job interviews, weddings, formal dinners, meeting your employer, these would all require knowing how to dress, speak, and behave according to unspoken rules. Get it wrong and people would judge you instantly. Schools drilled those rules early and often because they knew the world outside wouldn't give second chances. Skill 7: Basic money sense and household arithmetic. Before calculators, before decimal currency, children had to work with pounds, shillings, and pence in their heads. This wasn't abstract mathematics, it was survival skills. A typical arithmetic lesson might involve calculating a shopping bill: 3 pounds of potatoes at 4p a pound, 2 loaves of bread at 1 shilling and 3p each, a pint of milk at 6p. Add it up, work out the change from a 10-shilling note, and do it fast enough that you wouldn't hold up the queue at the grocer's. Imperial measurements added another layer of complexity. Children converted between ounces and pounds, pints and gallons, inches and feet and yards. They had to know these conversions cold because every shop, every recipe, every building plan used them. In domestic science, girls priced out entire meals, calculating cost per serving. In woodwork, boys measured timber and worked out how much they needed for a project, including wastage. Weekly wages came up constantly in maths problems. If father earns £14 10 shillings a week and mother earns £8 15, what's the household income? If rent costs 5 shillings a week, how much is left? These weren't hypothetical scenarios, these were the actual numbers families lived on. Schools taught children to understand money as something real and finite, not an abstract concept. You learned to check your change carefully, to spot when a shopkeeper had short-changed you, and to make quick calculations standing at a counter. No one was pulling out a phone to check the sums. Skill 8: Practical health, hygiene, and cleanliness. Hygiene lessons weren't gentle suggestions, they were drilled in as non-negotiable habits. Wash your hands before meals. Wash them after using the toilet. Keep your nails clean and trimmed. These rules came up in multiple subjects: PE, biology, domestic science, even during school nurse inspections. Domestic science taught girls the connection between cleanliness and health in stark terms. A dirty kitchen meant food poisoning. Unwashed hands meant spreading germs. They learned proper food storage, how to keep raw meat separate, why you couldn't leave milk out on a warm day. This was before modern refrigeration was universal, so understanding food safety mattered even more. Girls also learned housekeeping as health maintenance, airing rooms to prevent dampness and mold, changing bed linen regularly, and dealing with laundry properly. Schools called this housewifery, and it covered everything from sweeping floors correctly to understanding why you opened windows even in winter. The message was simple: your health is your responsibility, and it starts with keeping your environment clean. School nurses conducted regular inspections, checking heads for nits, looking at teeth, examining hands. If you failed the inspection, everyone knew. The shame was intentional. It taught children that personal hygiene wasn't private, it affected everyone around you. Basic first aid came up occasionally, usually through demonstration rather than practice, but most children left school knowing how to clean a cut, apply a bandage, and recognize when something needed a doctor. Skill 9. Working with others and respecting hierarchy. Schools ran on strict hierarchies, and children learned their place within them early. Prefects and monitors had real power. They could tell younger students off, give them orders, and report misbehavior that would lead to punishment. This wasn't symbolic authority. It was genuine control, and younger children learned to obey without question. In the playground and during PE, group games taught cooperation and competition simultaneously. You learned to work within a team, follow strategy, accept your role whether you were team captain or just filling a position. Winning felt good, but losing taught you to shake hands, accept defeat, and try again next time without complaint. School clubs reinforced these lessons. Join the choir and you follow the conductor's instructions precisely. Join a sports team and you answer to your captain and coach. Some schools had cadet forces where the hierarchy was even more explicit. Officers gave orders, lower ranks obeyed, and questioning wasn't tolerated. This constant practice within hierarchies taught children crucial skills. Knowing when to take orders, when to take initiative within your role, and how to fit into a group without causing friction. Skill 10. Perseverance, neatness, and pride in work. Neatness wasn't optional, it was graded. Your maths might be perfect, but if your handwriting was messy, you'd get marked down or told to copy the entire page again. Exercise books had to be pristine. No dog-eared corners, no doodles in margins, no crossed-out mistakes. If you made an error, you didn't scribble it out. You carefully ruled a single line through it, or used an eraser so gently that the paper didn't tear. Handwriting lessons were brutal in their precision. Every letter had to match a specific size, slant, and form. Teachers used rulers to check that your lines were straight and evenly spaced. They examined entire pages to ensure consistency from top to bottom. Sloppy handwriting wasn't seen as a minor flaw. It was evidence of a sloppy mind and poor character. This obsession with neatness extended to every subject. In needlework, stitches had to be uniform and invisible from the right side. A hem with uneven stitches would be unpicked and redone, even if it took 3 attempts to get right. In woodwork, rough edges or visible glue marks meant failure. The piece went back on the bench for more sanding, more filing, more work until it met the standard. Teachers returned to work constantly with one word written across the top: redo. Not because the content was wrong, but because it wasn't neat enough, wasn't careful enough, didn't show sufficient effort. This taught children a difficult lesson. Good enough wasn't good enough. Quality meant meeting an external standard, not your own personal satisfaction. The system was exhausting. Some children spent hours redoing work that was technically correct but cosmetically flawed. But it instilled something valuable: the understanding that how you present your work matters as much as the work itself. That pride in craftsmanship, whether it's a hand-sewn apron or a perfectly ruled geometry diagram, comes from effort and attention to detail. That finishing something properly is worth more than finishing something quickly. By the time students left school, they carried this mindset into everything they did. A generation of workers who took genuine pride in their output, who associated quality with care, and who understood that your work represented you. Factory workers who assembled products to exacting standards without supervision. Secretaries who produced flawless typed documents. Tradesmen who wouldn't leave a job site until everything was finished properly. These 10 skills created adults who could build, mend, cook, budget, and navigate social situations without constant help. They knew how to follow rules, respect authority, work within hierarchies, and take pride in what they produced. The methods were often harsh. The system was rigid. Many people who went through it have complicated feelings about those years. But here's what's undeniable. Children left school capable, not just educated, but functional. They could step into adult life, into marriage, into work, into running a household, without feeling lost. The world expected them to know these things, and schools made sure they did. Whether that trade-off was worth it, well, that's a question every generation has to answer for itself. What's certain is that we'll never see schools quite like that again.